Salt Lake City, Utah, in the fall has a different kind of beauty. The streets are empty, the mountains in the distance are capped with white snow, and the trees shed their leaves in shades of red, orange, and yellow, as if winter is silently creeping in. From my apartment, I look out the window and feel the quiet of it all. The air is crisp, but it's not just the chill that cuts through, it's the loneliness that sits heavy in my chest. People walk quickly on the streets, moving fast, like they all have somewhere to be, something to do. And I stand there, watching, feeling like I'm not part of any of it. I've built a life for myself, but there's an emptiness in me I can't shake. I'm Savannah Green, 34 years old, a marketing director at a tech startup in Salt Lake City. On the surface, I have everything that anyone would envy. A stable job, a gorgeous apartment in a peaceful suburban neighborhood, a career on the rise. But there's a truth no one sees. Behind this perfect facade, there's a deep crack in my life. And I'm here to tell you how it all led to a place where I sought revenge, not just on my sister, but for the years I spent trying to prove my worth. For the years I spent living in the shadows of someone who didn't deserve it. Salt Lake City in the fall has its own special kind of quiet, almost eerie, as if the world around me is holding its breath. The streets outside are deserted, and the mountains in the distance are tinged with snow. But I've never found the beauty in it. All I can see are the things that I've missed, the things I've tried to overlook in my life. There's something about the emptiness, the cold, that settles deep into your bones. The leaves fall, and it feels like everything around me is moving forward, while I'm stuck, frozen in time. Inside my apartment, I'm sitting at the window, looking out over the city. The lights from the buildings below flicker in the early evening, and it's almost peaceful almost. But it's just a mask. The peace never lasts. You would think that at 34, with everything I've accomplished, I would be content. But the truth is, I've spent years building a life that looks perfect from the outside. I've put in the work, I've gotten the promotions, the recognition. People look at me and think, she's got it all. But they don't know the story behind the story. They don't know about the shadow I've been living in. That shadow is Ella, my younger sister, the perfect one. The golden child. She's everything I could never be, beautiful, outgoing. Successful in ways that come effortlessly to her. Ella doesn't try, and yet she shines brighter than anyone else in the room. I've spent my whole life watching her be the center of attention, while I quietly played the role of the responsible older sister, doing everything right but getting none of the glory. Growing up, I wasn't the one everyone looked at. I wasn't the one who captured all the attention. Ella was. She was the one our parents doted on, the one who got the most praise, the one who could do no wrong. She was everything I wasn't, free, unburdened by responsibility. And I was the dependable one, the one who was always there, always doing what was expected, always in the background. I spent my whole childhood trying to prove my worth, trying to earn a place in a family that had already chosen their favorite. The more I worked, the more I did, the more I realized I would never be her. I would never be the one they saw, but I couldn't stop trying. Until one day, I realized I didn't have to try anymore. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. My parents, the ones I spent my life trying to please, died in a tragic plane crash while on a business trip. I didn't even have time to process the loss before I found myself in the middle of organizing their funeral. And as always, Ella was the one everyone turned to. She was the one who received all the sympathy, all the attention. She was the one who was so strong, the one who cried with her perfectly made-up face, the one who knew how to play the part. I stood there in the middle of all of it, doing the hard work, arranging the service, managing the guest lists, dealing with all the logistics, while no one noticed. No one paid attention to me. I was just the one who made everything happen, and in return I got nothing. Not even a second glance from the people who should have cared most. But Ella, she was the one who stole the show, as usual. That was the moment I realized. I had been living for everyone else my whole life, trying to be what my family wanted me to be, trying to earn their love and their approval, but they weren't going to give it to me. Ella had always been their favorite, and that wasn't going to change. So I made a choice. A choice that would change everything. I would walk away. I left it all behind. The family, the business, the expectations. I walked away from the inheritance, from everything that had defined me for so long. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their approval. What I needed was to find myself. What I needed was to stop living in the shadow of someone who didn't deserve to overshadow me. I built something of my own. I started a company in the tech industry, something I had always wanted to do. I didn't want to be the responsible sister anymore, the one who was always measured against someone else's success. I wanted to be free, to be me. But even as I moved on, I knew Ella wouldn't stay in her perfect bubble forever. There was always going to be a price for what she did, for the way she lived her life. And I was going to make her pay. The more I watched her flaunt her perfect life, the more I knew the time would come when it would all fall apart. I didn't need to rush. I would wait. And when the time came, I would be there, ready to take everything she thought she could control. Because sometimes, getting revenge isn't just about taking what's yours. It's about making sure that those who wronged you pay for what they've done. And that, my friends, is exactly what I was going to make happen. Growing up in a family of wealth and status in Park City, Utah, felt like living in a world of glass. From the outside, it all seemed perfect. A sprawling estate nestled against the mountains, the glitter of luxury at every turn. My parents were successful entrepreneurs, owning a chain of world-renowned resorts. They were the type of people everyone admired, and they had built an empire that seemed untouchable. But within those walls, beneath the glimmer of success, there was something that never felt quite right. From a young age, I understood that my family's love for me was a special kind of love, but it was never quite the kind I craved. It was a love that came with strings attached, a love that was conditional on my behavior, my success, and my willingness to always be the responsible one. My parents were proud of me, yes, but in a way that felt more like a duty, a form of gratitude for all the things I did to uphold the image of the perfect family. And then there was Ella. Ella wasn't just my younger sister. She was the center of the universe. She was the shining star that everyone gravitated towards. Beautiful, charming, with a smile that could light up any room, Ella had it all. Where I had to work tirelessly for every inch of recognition, Ella was simply noticed. It didn't matter what she did, how little effort she put in, she was always the one people admired. She didn't have to try to be good at everything. She just was. She excelled effortlessly in school, topped every competition, and was the one who was always invited to the best parties, the most exclusive events. The family business. Ella didn't have to prove herself like I did. She was in front of cameras by the time she was 10, joining campaigns for our family's resorts, being the face of everything. The world seemed to shower her with endless opportunities, while I was the quiet one in the background, always doing the work that no one noticed. Ella was not just beautiful, she was gifted, in every sense of the word. From modeling to academics, from social media influence to being the perfect daughter in our parents' eyes, she seemed to have everything. And perhaps the worst part was, she took it all for granted. She never had to fight for her place in the family, she was just there, effortlessly loved, effortlessly adored. I can still picture it, sitting at the dinner table, watching as our parents showered her with affection. Her laughter filling the room, her stories of school dances or new modeling gigs taking center stage while I quietly picked at my food. If I ever brought up something positive, like getting into an Ivy League school or securing an internship, I would be met with a quick, "Oh, that's nice, dear," followed by the next topic of conversation, which was inevitably about Ella. And it hurt deeply. The love they gave her wasn't just attention, it was devotion. Every moment of praise, every compliment, every offer of help, all went to her. Even when she made mistakes, they were excused with a simple, "Oh, she's just being Ella." No questions asked, no consequences. While I, on the other hand, was held to a standard of perfection, and it seemed like I could never measure up. I was the responsible one, the sensible one, the one who didn't need the kind of love that was so openly and freely given to Ella. At first, I convinced myself that I loved her. I adored her when we were younger. I would braid her hair before school, cheer for her at recitals, and look after her when she was sick. But as we grew older, something changed. The admiration I once had for her began to sour, turning into something darker, something more resentful. It wasn't just that I wasn't noticed, it was that she seemed to revel in the attention, almost unaware of how it affected me. And that was what broke me. Ella's light was always too bright for me. She made me feel small, invisible. I spent my childhood in her shadow, trying to carve out a space for myself that no one seemed to care about. My achievements were forgotten or brushed aside, while hers were paraded and celebrated. I remember the first time I truly realized how deep the wound was. It was during a family barbecue when Ella, in her innocent yet cutting way, pointed at me and said to our cousins, "Savannah's the brainy one, but I've got the looks." Everyone laughed, and I smiled through it, but deep down my chest tightened, my stomach turned. The truth hit me harder than I ever thought it could. Ella was everything I wasn't, and no matter how hard I tried, I could never be her. This is the part of my life that defined who I was for years. I was never seen for who I truly was. I was always the responsible sister, the one who makes the right decisions, but in the eyes of my family, I was never the star. Ella was, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I was just an extra character in a story where she was the lead. The worst part? I had no one to talk to about it. The more I felt suffocated by it, the more I buried those feelings, burying them deeper into a place where I couldn't feel them anymore. I look back now and wonder how I managed to keep going for so long. I tried, I really did. I gave everything I had to this family. I did everything they asked of me with no complaints. I was the responsible one, the one who followed the rules, the one who always showed up when needed. I studied hard, I kept everything in order, I made sure the family name was protected and upheld. I thought if I just worked harder, I would eventually earn the recognition I deserved. But no matter what I did, I was always invisible. Ella was always there, shining so brightly, so effortlessly. The one everyone adored. The one they all cared about. The one who didn't have to try at all, yet still became the center of the world. She didn't work for her praise, it just came to her naturally. She was the golden child, the one whose laughter filled the room, the one whose presence drew everyone's eyes. She was their pride, their joy. And I was just there, the quiet one in the background, trying to make things happen without anyone noticing. It was suffocating. I spent years pretending it didn't bother me, pretending it didn't hurt to see my parents' love so freely given to Ella while I was left to handle the difficult things. I convinced myself that I was happy for her, that her success was my success too. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be her. I would never be the one they celebrated. The one who got the attention. I felt like a shadow in my own family. It's an odd thing to say, but it's true. I was always there, but I never truly existed in the way I wanted to. The family's love was always stretched thin between us, but Ella's was always the one that was embraced most. They didn't need to say it out loud. I could feel it in every glance, every conversation, every smile they gave her. I was the responsible one, the one who took care of everything, but I was also the one who was forgotten in the process. It was a crushing realization that I carried for years. It felt like suffocating under the weight of something I couldn't change. The more I tried to make my voice heard, the more it felt like I was shouting into a void. Every moment, I fought to prove my worth, but every time I did, Ella was there, taking up the space I was desperately trying to claim. It became exhausting, pretending that I didn't care, pretending that I didn't mind being the one in the background. The worst part was, I started to believe it. I began to convince myself that maybe I was just meant to be in the background. That maybe my worth was in being the reliable one, the one who kept things together. But that wasn't enough. I was suffocating, and I knew it. I had given everything for them. I had sacrificed myself, my dreams, my desires, all in the hopes of earning something that would never come. And the truth hit me harder than any of their indifference ever could. I had spent my entire life trying to be someone I wasn't. Trying to be the daughter they wanted, the sister they adored. And in doing so, I lost who I truly was. It wasn't until everything fell apart that I realized I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to keep fighting for a place in a family that would never see me the way I needed to be seen. I was tired of being the shadow. I was tired of pretending I didn't matter. And that's when I decided. I would no longer live for them. I would live for me. Everything changed one cold, bitter winter night when I got the call. The kind of call that rips your world apart before you can even process the words being spoken. My parents were gone, killed in a plane crash during a business trip. I remember the moment clearly, the phone pressed to my ear as I stood frozen in my apartment, unable to move, to breathe, to even comprehend what was happening. The words echoed in my mind, but they didn't make sense. How could they be gone? How could I be here in this life without them? I had always known that one day this moment would come, but I was never prepared for it. I was never prepared for the feeling of being so utterly alone, so abandoned in a world that suddenly felt empty and cold. The next few hours were a blur of frantic phone calls, arrangements, and the crushing weight of responsibilities that I didn't know how to bear. But somehow, I did. I put on the mask that I had worn my entire life, the mask of the responsible one, the one who kept it all together when the world fell apart. When I arrived at the funeral, it was like I had stepped into a scene from a movie. The room was filled with people, family, friends, colleagues, all gathered to mourn my parents. But as I stood there, amidst the sea of people, I realized something that hit me harder than any of the grief I had been suppressing. The attention wasn't on me, it was on Ella. Ella was at the center of it all, of course. She was the one everyone flocked to, the one receiving all the sympathy, the one everyone admired for her strength in such a devastating time. People told her how brave she was, how she was handling everything with such grace. The way she smiled through the tears, the way she seemed to hold it all together, it was as if she had become the epitome of everything my parents had ever hoped for. And I was the one standing in the background, making sure the details were handled, the one arranging flowers, organizing the guest list, ensuring everything was in its place. Not once did anyone look at me and ask how I was doing. No one noticed the weight I was carrying, the heartache that was suffocating me from the inside out. I was the invisible one once again, playing the role I had always played, but this time, it felt like I was invisible to the point of being non-existent. I felt a coldness seep into my bones as I watched Ella bask in the attention, as I watched her act like everything was fine, like she was the one who deserved to be the center of it all. It was like a cruel joke, a joke that no one had told me about. I was the one who had spent years working to keep everything in order, to keep our family's reputation intact, to do the right thing every single time. Yet here I was, in the moment that should have been the hardest of my life, invisible. And Ella was the one everyone looked to, the one everyone turned to for comfort, for guidance. That moment felt like the final nail in the coffin. It felt like the last shred of hope I had left was taken from me. It wasn't just the loss of my parents. It was the realization that, even in their death, I would always be in the background. Ella had always been the one everyone looked at, and it felt like that would never change. I would never be enough. Not to them, not to anyone. And in that moment, I felt a shift inside me. A moment of clarity, where I understood that I didn't need to keep fighting for a place in a family that had already chosen its favorite. I didn't need to keep pretending to be strong, to be the responsible one, to keep holding everything together when no one was even paying attention to my pain. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This family, the people I had spent my entire life trying to please, would never see me the way I needed them to. Ella would always be the star, the one who got everything, and I would always be the one who took care of the details, who kept things running behind the scenes. And that was the moment I knew it was time to walk away. For good. As I stood there, watching Ella draw the spotlight, I couldn't ignore the cold, gnawing truth that had been festering inside me for years. She was everything I was not. Effortlessly captivating, effortlessly adored. The way people surrounded her, hanging on her every word, every gesture, It was as if she were the only person in the room that mattered. And there I was, fading into the background, blending in with the walls, unnoticed. The same cycle that had played out for so long, over and over again. It was at that very moment, standing at the back of the room, trying to keep it all together while Ella bathed in attention, that the realization hit me harder than anything else could. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in a family that didn't see me. A family that valued the wrong things. A family that constantly lifted Ella up while I remained in the shadows, no matter how hard I tried. All the sacrifices I had made, all the nights I stayed up late working, all the effort I poured into making sure everyone was happy and everything was running smoothly, it all felt meaningless. Nothing I did seemed to matter. Nothing I did seemed to make a difference. No matter how many times I put my own desires aside, no matter how many times I sacrificed my own happiness for the sake of the family, it was never enough. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living this lie. The suffocating weight of it all finally became too much to bear. I had been living for others, bending over backward to fit into a role that wasn't mine. I was trying to be the person they wanted me to be, the one who didn't make waves, the one who kept everything running smoothly. But in the process, I had lost myself. I had become a ghost in my own life, a bystander in the family I had fought so hard to be a part of. And that's when it hit me, the realization that I had been living in Ella's shadow for too long. I had been allowing myself to be defined by her, by the way people saw her, by the way she commanded attention without even trying. No more. I couldn't stand it any longer. I couldn't stand being invisible, being overlooked, being nothing more than a footnote in the story of my own life. I knew what I had to do. I had to break free. I had to take back my life and stop living for others. For so long, I had been trying to measure up to something I would never be, trying to earn something that would never be mine. But now, I was done. Done living in her shadow. Done letting her dictate the narrative of my life. It was time for me to step out from the darkness, to stop pretending that my worth was tied to anyone else's approval. I wasn't going to be the background character in my own story anymore. I was going to take control, take ownership of my life, and finally start living for myself. I didn't need their recognition. I didn't need Ella's spotlight. I needed my own path. I needed to be free. The day of the inheritance meeting came, and it felt like the weight of my entire life was hanging in the balance. I walked into the family's grand, oak-paneled conference room, the room that had seen so many decisions made, so many fortunes built. It felt colder than I had remembered, more suffocating, as though the walls were closing in on me. I knew what was coming, but still, I wasn't prepared for it. Ella was sitting at the head of the table, her posture straight, her perfect smile still intact despite the gravity of the moment. She looked confident, as if everything had already been decided in her mind. My parents' estate was worth millions, everything they had worked for, everything they had built. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about everything they had left behind, their legacy, their approval, the attention I had spent my whole life craving. As the meeting began, the lawyers began to go over the details, listing out the properties, the investments, the resorts, the shares. And then came the moment I had been dreading, the moment when the inheritance was officially handed over. Ella spoke up, her voice smooth, assured, as if it was all hers to claim. "I will be taking full control of the estate," she said. "I've been running the family business for years, and it's only right that I take the reins now." And just like that, it was done. Ella was given everything, all the properties, all the business assets, all the wealth. She was the one who had been managing everything, and in a single sentence, it was clear that my place in this family, this empire, had never truly been meant to exist. I sat there in silence, my chest tightening, my breath catching in my throat. The years of sacrifice, the years of being the reliable one, the responsible one, all for nothing. I was nothing more than an afterthought in my family's grand narrative. They didn't see me, not really. I had never been given the chance to prove myself, never given the opportunity to have a voice. It had always been about Ella, and in that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. I wasn't going to be a part of their game anymore. I wasn't going to be a pawn in this family drama that had been playing out for years. I had spent my whole life chasing approval, chasing recognition, chasing a place in a family that had already chosen its favorite. And now, sitting in that room, watching Ella take it all, I made a choice. I would walk away, I would give up everything. The money, the property, the family business, all of it, because I didn't want to be a part of this. I didn't want to be caught in this toxic web of favoritism and inequality. I didn't want to be the person who kept playing the role they had assigned me, a role that no longer fit who I was or who I wanted to be. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made. I had spent my whole life believing that this inheritance, this family, would one day be mine, but now I knew I would never have it. Not this way. Not if it meant continuing to live in Ella's shadow, to continue to play the part of the invisible sister. So, I made the decision to walk away. I left the table, I left the room, and I left behind the legacy that had always been so carefully constructed for me. For the first time, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me, and though I knew the road ahead would be hard, though I didn't know exactly where I was going, I knew this. I was finally free. Free from the expectations. Free from the suffocation. Free from the need to prove myself to a family that had never truly seen me. I sat there, staring at the contract, the paperwork that laid out everything I was walking away from. The estate, the business, the money. My entire future, neatly packaged in front of me. The decision to sign away my right to it all should have felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done, but instead it felt strangely liberating. I had spent my whole life being groomed to take over, to be the one who inherited the family's wealth, the family's name. But deep down, I knew I didn't want it. I didn't want to carry the weight of that expectation anymore. I didn't want to be the person who was always trying to fill a role that wasn't meant for me. A role I had never asked for, yet had been forced into since I was a child. For years, I had convinced myself that the inheritance, the approval from my family, was what I needed to feel whole. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was exactly what had kept me trapped. This endless cycle of doing everything right, of working tirelessly to prove I was worthy of something I had never been given. And every time I achieved something, every time I was praised, it always felt like a small victory that no one truly noticed. It was never enough. Walking away from the inheritance wasn't an easy choice. It meant giving up everything I had known. The comfort of money, the stability of the business, the security of family. But in that moment, I knew that if I didn't do this now, if I didn't take this step, I would forever be the person who was just there, the one who was always overlooked, the one who was never truly seen. I couldn't live like that anymore. I didn't want to be a perpetual heir, waiting for my turn in a family that had already chosen who they would focus on. I didn't want to be the one who always lived under someone else's shadow, constantly chasing a place that I would never be allowed to hold. I had been invisible for far too long, and I was done. I needed freedom. I needed to feel alive again, to feel like I was in control of my own life. I needed to build something on my own terms. No more playing by other people's rules. No more following a script that had already been written for me. It was terrifying. I wasn't sure what I would do next, or where I would go, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making a decision for me. Not for them, not for Ella, not for anyone else, for me. After I walked away, I expected to feel relief. And in many ways, I did. But what came next was something I hadn't anticipated. Ella, the perfect, untouchable Ella, was suddenly facing the consequences of the life she had built on illusion and deceit. It didn't take long for things to fall apart for her. The image of the flawless, in-control sister I had once envied was quickly cracking under the weight of reality. The family business, which she had been running for years, was crumbling. What had seemed like an endless stream of success, the carefully cultivated public image of an empire, was now unraveling. Financial difficulties began to mount, and clients who had once eagerly signed contracts were now pulling back, unwilling to associate with a company in turmoil. Investors who had been blindly loyal started questioning her every decision, and partners, once firm in their support, began withdrawing their backing. I could hear the panic in her voice when the calls started coming. They came at all hours of the day and night, messages flooding my phone, one after another. She pleaded with me, begged me for help, for advice, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the one to fix everything again. I had spent my life fixing things for her, for the family, and now it was her turn to face the consequences of her choices. For the first time, Ella wasn't the center of attention. The perfect sister who always had it together was falling apart, and I was left watching from the sidelines. Her voice on the other end of the phone was desperate, frantic, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had made my decision. I had stepped away from the person I used to be, and I wasn't going back. Not for her, not for anyone. The more I ignored her calls, the more I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. The feeling of powerlessness, the years of being her fallback, the never-ending cycle of putting her needs above mine, all of it was finally over. Ella had always counted on me to clean up her messes, to be the one who fixed everything when things went wrong. But this time, I wasn't there to pick up the pieces. This time, she had to face the mess she had created. Her desperation was palpable. I knew her well enough to hear the tremor in her voice, the way she tried to sound composed, but the cracks were showing. She had built her life on the belief that things would always work out for her, that her charm and beauty would keep the world at her feet. But the reality was much harsher than she ever expected. And now, for the first time, I saw her for what she really was. Not the perfect sister, but a person who had always relied on others to carry her, to clean up after her, to protect her from the consequences of her actions. And as the days passed, I listened to the increasing urgency in her messages, each one more desperate than the last, and I felt a mixture of pity and something else I didn't want to acknowledge, satisfaction. The satisfaction of knowing that, for once, the consequences of her actions were hers to bear. She had always gotten away with things, always skated by without ever truly facing the music. But now she was learning what it felt like to fall. As the days went by, Ella's calls became more frantic, her voice increasingly unhinged with each voicemail. The more she begged for my help, the more I started to pull away. But in the midst of ignoring her, I began to piece together something that shook me to my core. I noticed small discrepancies, things that didn't quite add up. Financial reports, emails from the company that I hadn't seen before, and the way certain things were just slipping through the cracks. Then it hit me, a truth so dark I could hardly believe it at first. Ella had been playing a game from the very beginning. For years, she had been quietly pulling the strings, manipulating everything to ensure that she would have full control of the family empire. I had been so blinded by my resentment, so focused on the idea of proving myself, that I had never questioned her actions. But now, as the pieces started to fall into place, I saw the horrifying truth. Before my parents' death, Ella had been siphoning money from the company's accounts. I traced the transactions, following a trail of funds that led to an offshore account in her name. She had been systematically draining the business for months, preparing herself to take over. But that wasn't all. She had been transferring assets, real estate, investments, valuable properties into her name, setting up the company to fail. It was as though she had planned this all along, to have everything handed to her, no matter the cost. The worst part, I had been so blinded by my own battles, by my need to stay in the background and stay out of her way, that I had never noticed what she was doing. Ella had manipulated me too. She had woven a web of lies so carefully, so skillfully, that I never even suspected the truth. I had been pushed aside, just as she had always wanted. But this time, it wasn't just about me being ignored, it was about something much darker. I dug deeper, trying to understand how far Ella's deception had gone, and that's when I uncovered something even more chilling. She had orchestrated my departure from the family business. She had made sure I would leave so she could take control. She had planted seeds of doubt in my mind, subtly suggesting that I wasn't cut out for the family business, that I should focus on my own career and stop meddling in matters I didn't understand. In subtle, manipulative ways, she made me believe that stepping away was the right thing to do. And in my desperation to escape the suffocating weight of our family's expectations, I had walked away, just as she had planned. It felt like a punch to the gut. All those years, all that time I had spent working to keep the family together, to keep the business alive, and it had all been for nothing. Ella had been playing her own game the entire time, making moves behind the scenes, while I naively believed I was the one in control of my life. The shock of it all hit me like a tidal wave. I sat there stunned, as the weight of Ella's deceit settled over me. All those years I had spent working tirelessly for the family business, trying to earn my place, trying to prove that I could contribute, had been for nothing. I had been blind, completely unaware of the fact that I had been unknowingly serving Ella's interests all along. For so long, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was helping, being the responsible one, making sure the business stayed afloat, keeping everything in check. I believed that by stepping back and allowing Ella to take charge, I was doing what was best for the family, what was best for the business. But in reality, I had been nothing more than a pawn in her game, a pawn she used to cover up her own schemes. It's funny, isn't it? How blind we can be when we think we're doing the right thing, when we think we're in control. I had been so focused on my own guilt, so consumed by my need to stay in the background, that I never once questioned the person I was helping, the person who was benefiting from all my efforts. Ella was so good at playing the part of the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, that I never saw what was happening right under my nose. And now, as I stared at the evidence of her betrayal, the depth of her manipulation, it was almost too much to bear. Ella had orchestrated everything, from my departure from the company to her careful financial plundering. All of it had been part of a plan, and I had walked right into it. I had given her exactly what she wanted, thinking I was just doing what was expected of me, but I was wrong, so wrong. The realization stung deep in my gut. The anger I felt was sharp, cutting through every layer of guilt I had carried for so long. But it wasn't just anger, it was a sense of profound betrayal. All those years, I had been the one holding everything together, putting in the hard work, keeping the business afloat, while Ella was quietly stealing it all away. She had played me, used me, and I had been too blind to see it. But as the pieces fell into place, something inside me shifted. I had always been the one in the background, the one who fixed everything, the one who kept things from falling apart. But I wasn't going to stay in the background anymore. I wasn't going to sit idly by while Ella reaped the rewards of her lies and manipulation. She had to face the consequences of her actions. She had to pay for what she had done, not just to the family, but to me. I wasn't going to stand on the sidelines anymore, watching as she destroyed everything my parents had built. This was no longer just about a business. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the life I had lost, the life she had stolen from me, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I couldn't let Ella get away with what she had done. Not after everything she had taken from me, from the family. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It wasn't just about revenge for the money or the assets she had so ruthlessly stolen. It was about everything I had been denied, everything she had made me feel I was never worthy of. This was personal, so I started digging. I went through every financial report, every contract, every transaction that was linked to the family business. I wasn't just looking for loopholes, I was looking for cracks. I needed to find where Ella had messed up, where she had made the smallest mistake in her grand scheme. And believe me, no one is perfect. Even Ella, with all her charm and manipulative genius, had her weaknesses. The more I dug, the more I found. The signs were there, hidden in the fine print, in the unaccounted-for funds, the off-the-books transactions. Ella had been careless. She had underestimated how far I would go to take back what was mine. It wasn't just about being angry anymore. This was about taking control and getting what I was owed. And I wasn't going to stop until I had it. I started crafting my plan carefully, step by step. I didn't want to make a scene, didn't want anyone to know what I was about to do. I created a competing company, something that could rival the family business, something that would take Ella's market share and force her to face the consequences of her greed. But I did it all in the shadows, moving slowly, building from the ground up. No one knew what I was up to, not Ella, not the board members, not the investors. I played my cards close to my chest. I started small. A tech company, something with an edge, something that would appeal to the same clients and markets that Ella's company had once dominated. I knew the ins and outs of her business. I had been part of it for so long that I knew exactly where to strike. I hired the right people, brought in experts who could help me navigate the competitive landscape. I didn't need to rush. I had time. And while I was quietly building my company, Ella's world was beginning to crumble. The debts she had created, the lies she had told, the foundation she had built on sand, it was all starting to collapse under the pressure. Partners were pulling out, clients were leaving, and she was drowning in the consequences of her own actions. Every move she made seemed to dig her deeper into the hole she had created for herself. And all the while, I was waiting. I was watching. And when the time came, I made my move. I carefully launched my company, gradually taking away her clients, her partners, her market share. It wasn't just about taking her business, it was about making her feel the weight of her actions. Every deal I closed, every step I took to undermine her empire, felt like a personal victory. It was the sweet taste of justice, the sweet taste of reclaiming everything she had stolen from me. The beauty of it all was that I didn't need to lift a finger to bring her down. She was already doing it to herself, and I was simply there to pick up the pieces. The day Ella's company finally collapsed was the moment I had been waiting for. I had watched her unravel, piece by piece, for months, but now it was clear. Everything she had built was crumbling under the weight of her lies and deceit. She could no longer maintain the facade of control, the image of the perfect CEO. Her empire was falling apart, and I knew that this was the moment to expose everything. I couldn't let her escape the consequences of what she had done, not this time. I had worked too hard, fought too long, and sacrificed too much for me to sit by and watch her get away with it. With everything in place, I called a meeting with the board of directors and the major investors of her company. I made sure the timing was perfect, when the company was at its weakest, when Ella had no more excuses left to offer. I walked into that room with confidence, knowing that what I was about to do would change everything. As they sat there, waiting for the meeting to start, I revealed the truth. I laid out every single piece of evidence I had gathered over the past months, each document, each email, each transaction that proved Ella's manipulation. I didn't hold back. I explained how she had been siphoning funds from the company for years, how she had secretly transferred valuable assets into her name, and how she had put the company in an impossible financial position by racking up massive debts. I told them about the way she had lied to the board and manipulated everyone around her, including me, to make sure she stayed on top. Ella's face turned pale as the truth came crashing down around her. She tried to speak to defend herself, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming. The trust she had once held with the board and her partners was shattered. They looked at her, disappointed and disgusted, no longer seeing the golden child they had once admired. And in that moment, I realized that I had finally done it. I had exposed the truth. I had brought down the woman who had tried to destroy me, the woman who had used me for so long. But more than that, I had taken back my power. I had taken control of my own life, my own destiny. As the meeting continued, it was clear that Ella would not recover from this. She had lost everything, her business, her reputation, her credibility. The board voted unanimously to remove her from the company, and with that, her reign was over. She was left with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. And for me, the reward was sweeter than I ever could have imagined. Not only did I regain a significant portion of the family business, but I had also proven that I could stand on my own. I had shown the world, and more importantly, myself, that I would never again be someone's pawn. I wasn't just the responsible sister anymore. I wasn't the one who stayed in the background. I was Savannah Green, and I had earned everything I had. The feeling of standing there, knowing I had finally won, was indescribable. It wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't just about getting back at Ella for everything she had done to me. No, this was so much more. I had not only taken back what was mine, but I had also reclaimed my life in a way I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like a shadow, a ghost, or a forgotten sister. I felt whole. The business, the empire that had once been handed over to Ella on a silver platter, was no longer hers. It was mine, at least part of it was. But it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the assets or the business empire. It was about proving to myself that I was capable, that I could stand up for what was mine, that I didn't need to keep chasing approval from anyone, especially not from the family that had overlooked me for so long. I had spent years trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to be the perfect daughter, the one who followed the rules, the one who always played it safe. I had spent so much time hiding in the background, making sure everything ran smoothly, while Ella took all the credit, took all the love, took all the recognition. But now I realized that I didn't need any of that. I didn't need their love or their approval. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. What was even more liberating was that I had finally found myself. I wasn't the good daughter or the responsible sister anymore. I was Savannah Green, and that was enough. I didn't have to measure myself against anyone else's expectations or achievements. I had built something for myself, something real and tangible, not something handed to me or built on the sacrifices of others. And as I stood there, watching everything I had worked for fall into place, I knew I had taken back control. Ella had lost everything because of her greed, her manipulation, her disregard for the people around her. But I had gained something far more valuable. I had found my own strength, my own power. I was no longer the forgotten sister, the one left behind. I was the one who had taken charge of her own fate. I was the one who had faced the truth and turned it into something that belonged to me. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder to see if anyone was watching. I wasn't seeking validation or approval. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was enough. I knew I was enough. And that feeling of finally being free, of owning my own story, my own future, it was better than any victory, any prize, or any business success I could have ever dreamed of. No one could take that from me. No one could use me again. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about recognizing your own worth, standing up for yourself, and never letting anyone dictate your life. I learned that sometimes you have to walk away from everything, the expectations, the comfort, the security, to reclaim your freedom and your dignity. It's not always easy, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's always worth it. I spent so many years living in the shadow of someone else, trying to prove my worth in a family that never saw me for who I truly was. But when I finally stepped into the light, when I stopped letting my past control me, I became the person I was always meant to be. I found my strength, my independence, and the courage to take back my life. Never let anyone control your life. No matter how hard it gets, if you fight for yourself and stand up for who you truly are, you will never have to live in anyone's shadow again. The path may be difficult, and the road may be long, but in the end, the freedom you gain is worth every step.